You are listening to the Thinking Effect podcast with Orshel Green and Lillian Kriegler. Hello and welcome to episode 27 of the Thinking Effect podcast. How can teachers use questions to enhance learning? I have a very special guest with me today, Nikki Maguire, to talk about this very important topic. So let's say hello to Nikki. Hey, Nikki, how are you?
Hi, Lillian. I'm fabulous today. Really excited to share a passion of mine around questioning and curiosity and imagination in the classroom.
Fabulous. Nikki, would you introduce yourself to us and to our listeners?
Hi, everyone. My background is in education and also as a consultant and presenter in both primary, secondary, and also the tertiary education sectors. My career has spanned across independent, government and the Catholic education sectors. I've got a real passion for the science of learning, for inclusive education, and that's been fulfilled in my Masters in Inclusive Education. I'm a certified international Feuerstein instrumental enrichment trainer and facilitator, and an experienced dynamic assessment practitioner. I've worked across learning enhancement, academic coaching, wellbeing, school planning, and also program designs and delivery in my career so far.
I know, and we've worked together for many years, Nikki, and your training that you did to become your senior coach, we did a lot of that study together and have had the privilege of traveling to some of the capitals in Europe to do the summer schools. So for the listeners, that Feuerstein instrumental enrichment is deeply engages with thinking, and the Professor Ruben Feuerstein, and I speak about him really often, designed and practiced and became very, very knowledgeable about 28 cognitive functions and how they help us at every age to think and to help our knowledge to grow, but even intelligence. And so Nikki and I have spent a lot of time together, and we've really been privileged to learn and have those foundations together. But as you say, Nikki, curiosity is probably one of the greatest drivers of learning. And how you get to curiosity is through questioning. And I know that you have some great ideas about this. So would you like to tell us what you know and what you think about questions in the classroom?
Thanks, Lillian. I think at the moment it's more important than ever that we are really focused on creating that ecosystem or incubator of curiosity and imagination through questioning in our classrooms, in our schools. Recently, I've read the book Imagine If by Kate and the late Sir Ken Robinson, where they talk about questioning as a critical skill for our future and for the future, as it leads to curiosity, and that helps our children and ourselves make sense of the world that we currently live in and the future. Warren Berger also wrote an amazing book called The Beautiful Question, and he defines questions as ambitious and ambitious and actionable that shifts the way that we perceive or think about something and serves us as a catalyst to bring about change. And I think they're really important quotes at this stage of our ever-changing society. These questions in particular that we're talking about today, and as you mentioned through our training at through Independent Schools Victoria in the Feuerstein technique, these questions help us move these students from this visual perception in learning where they can look at something and come up with an answer, but not actually understand why, to that cognition space. And we move from visual perception to cognition through the language and the language that we use when we question. This questioning is both important as we organise our thinking around what we don't know, and also for our students or children to be immersed in a culture that celebrates and provides so many opportunities for asking those big questions, because those big questions help us to normalise uncertainty or change and also impacts in a very large way our children's capacities to embrace uncertainty and to also imagine possibilities for a better world.
That's right. And I know in your work, you don't only place this question generating task in the lap of the teacher, but that it is very, very important that the students themselves are given space to generate questions, whether it's towards some known destination or, as you say, to imagine something and to bring something completely new and innovative to the table. We used to giving closed-ended questions, and there's so many ways that you can open up something, even if there is a destination, like even if you want children to know how you add up to 17, you can either make them do a task with 3 examples, or you can say, how do you get to 17, and listen to them come up with not 3 or 5 but 100 different ways, and often use skills and information you didn't even know they had. So that questioning is really important, and getting them actively involved is really important. So what are some of the ways, Nikki, could you share with the listeners some of the ways that this questioning happens in the classroom?
I think, Lillian, when we're born asking questions, and it's important in our survival. So we start asking questions around factual objects, and then we move it around that age of 4 years old to those explanations. And that stage of life, we've got this rapid brain growth, we've got synapses that are working, the children are constantly connecting stimuli or thoughts and making mental connections, and they keep asking to seek more clarification and information. And you'll know if you speak to any parents around that early childhood, in that early childhood space, that they're almost exhausted by the questions that these younger children ask. Interestingly, these children are trying to categorise by using classification or labelling to extend their existing neural pathways and create learning or mental models to classify or categorise. And we know this through the research of psychologists such as Mostovsky. This something that really was important for me to guide my thinking around questions was at that age of 4 or 5, Paul Harris from Harvard has found that the 4-year-old asks about 390 questions each day, which equates to about 40,000 questions by that age of 4 or 5. A psychologist called Gopnik actually refers to children as like the research and development division of the human species, which I liked. All of a sudden, these children start school, and we see the questions, or number of questions they ask, instantly decline at that age group, which can be for a number of reasons. But over time, some of the research that the Right Question Institute out of Harvard have completed, we also see that disengagement increase, and they sort of cross over around that year 9 age. So I think that the role of questioning is really integral in our school. And as you said before, we're trained as educators to formulate and spend time creating these magical questions to ask students and to guide them into developing. But that ownership needs to be back on the students so that they can have increased buy-in, if you like, or interest or engagement in their learning. And that's where we look at some of the work, and some of my favourite work from the Right Question Institute.
Yeah, so I think in our conversation, when we were thinking about this podcast, you were saying that, you open up a topic by saying to the children, what do you see, or what would you like to know about this? And then to generate, or have them generate, a multiplicity of questions. So, in Reggio Emilia, the practice is that you might bring a provocation into the room. So the children might walk in one day and there is, say, a bird in a cage, or there might be a bowl of fish, or, you know, for older students, there might be a table set up with magnets. And then it's not about you getting involved teaching them, but for them to draw out from them all of the possible questions. And I think if they allow to do that, I think you'd agree that slowly but surely those questions become more complex in nature and more around combining information, even from different topic areas and subject areas. Might be science linked with maths, it might be art linked with literacy, because the more they ask, and you know, and then give them the opportunity to go out and find the answers and share them with other students. So tell us a little bit more about that questioning technique that comes out of Harvard.
Well, the Right Questioning Institute, or the Right Question Institute has the question formulation technique, and they're very generous. If you do go online, and I'll pass on some references for you to investigate for your own settings. This formulation technique is something that's very easy to take and pop into your practice across subjects, actually embed in your teaching practice. And that role, as you mentioned before, that teacher's role is almost the curator of the classroom climate, integral to this classroom of curiosity or questioning, so that their role is to make sure the students feel that they're psychologically safe to participate, that they feel included and they belong in this classroom. And to start with that, I like the word multimodal prompt. As you mentioned, it might be a bowl of fish, or it could be some text or an image or a film or a newspaper article that they use to spark the students' interest in the beginning. So the question formulation technique allows students to think divergently, convergently, and also metacognitively. And that's a really important skill for us moving into the future, that our students are able to do this. We're provoking responses to make children's thinking really visible, so we can see where we need to deepen or extend or challenge our students' thinking. And we engage the students right from the very beginning, so that they're identifying the problems or the questions or the statements they have around this prompt and posing the problems for themselves, which also further supports that innovative mindset that we all hope to have in our children moving forward.
Yes, I love that. So, you know, some of the questions, as you mentioned, will open up a content area and take them in different directions. And then they can share it. They can share it with parents, with each other, with other classmates. But I love that distinction you made also about the questions leading to metacognition, or children's understanding about their own thinking. I think that's really important. And you know, rather than saying, you know, if we continue with the literacy, say, about the story itself, you know, at the end of it, to be metacognitive, I have to say that word all over again, to be metacognitive, you know, the children can ask things like, what were you best at today? What did you assume about today's learning when we started, and how has that changed? And are you sure you understand it, and how do you know? So there are lots of questions which tune them in to the kinds of thinking that they're doing that are often related to emotion, not really even to cognition. So we can choose our questioning for different purposes, whether it is to get the content well versed, to get the consolidation of content, to tune in with the emotion, to understand, you know, how motivated they are, to see them growing their confidence and to build that, but also for them to understand their role and how their brain is being harnessed in answering these questions. I love that distinction, because the questions really do drive curiosity, as we said.
That's right. The question formulation technique, or QFT, has protocols around that, and that's another role of the teacher or the educator, to really create that climate or that ecosystem of questions where the students turn their thinking about a particular topic into a question, and then the students are guided to define them as open or closed questions, and to turn statements into questions that might have sparked some sort of interest for them. They also, as they move through this protocol, strategize by prioritising the questions. What's most interesting to them? What do they consider to be the most important question to ask? What will best help you in your research project? How will you solve the problem? What do you need? And so often we look at these are questions, and we ask the questions, but in this particular protocol, it's also about what do you need to know, or the information you need to gather, but also how do you do that? What are the tasks or action? What is your process? What are your strategies for gathering this information? And I really liked that, both the information and the action space of gathering the answers for these questions that you may pose.
I love that, because, that's what teachers usually do. We do all the hard work, but now you're putting the students in position where they are going through this incredible process of deciding what they need and which are the best questions. So they're in a situation where they're evaluating things, and it's genuinely coming from them. I mean, don't you just get mad when people ask a very closed question? I don't know if you've watched it on telly. You'll have a sportsman doing something amazing, and then the interviewer will say, well, are you feeling excited as though you've achieved your lifetime goal today? Because honestly, you made it look easy because you pulled out such a diversity of techniques. How are you feeling about that? What can they say? Pretty much say, oh, yes, because you formulated the whole question and the response all at once, and there's really nothing else to add. So you want the students to really dig deep and understand what questions they want to formulate and what is going to interest them the most. So, I mean, one of the interesting projects I did at one stage was to ask the children in the classroom, what is a line? L-I-N-E. And I mean, I have my reasons for asking them that question, but they then had to start identifying lines all over the place, and they found them everywhere. They found them in their artwork. There were straight ones and curly ones. They found them in their construction, where they straightened things, or when things fell over, the vertical and horizontal lines. They found it in artwork, in clay work. They found it in photography. And, they even had a project where they were given a camera and sent off. So they were questioning the environment as to where are these lines residing. And they found them in walls, on fences, in pavements. They found organic ones in the leaves. So when you put the question with the children, it just opened up so many different areas. And then they were able to talk about, when I write the letter A, I have a line. There's one that's round and there's one that's straight. And just their vocabulary boomed. So when you ask the right question and get them to continue the questioning, and, particularly with younger children, questions aren't even always verbal. They might be involved in the action, or they might need action to open them up. But, they definitely became very curious about lines, and their parents were saying, what are you doing? I keep on hearing about a line here and a line there and a line everywhere. So, I think that your methodology of unpacking questions and evaluating them can be very, very important for educators in the classroom.
That's right. And I think one of the most important factors in this creation of a questioning classroom is the involvement of parents as well, because that, as you mentioned before, that transfer of knowledge, transfer of learning also helps to strengthen that brain development as well. I think the parents just have an integral role in our education of our young people, and that partnership of creating the questioning classroom. Asking questions, there's an example of the Nobel laureate scientist Isidore Isaac Rabi, and I think this is a really lovely way to finish, is this particular scientist talks about her mother asking her as a child, what good question did you ask today, instead of asking what did you learn, because it gives our students the feedback that learning is more than just a final score, but a lifelong skill. And I think as educators, it's our job, as Deborah Meir talks about from the USA, creating schools or classroom that are places that are more interested in what we don't know and not just what we do know. And I think that's a really great way of looking at what we're doing in the classrooms.
Oh, those are really beautiful quotes, Nikki. So yeah, just to briefly summarize, because we do a little summary spot towards the end of our podcast. Why are we asking questions? Questions drive curiosity, and curiosity drives learning. So as students are able to generate their own questions, evaluate and follow their own questions, they become more confident learners, they become more engaged, and they become more independent learners, and they develop the language that they communicate their ideas and their knowledge. And I love that you mentioned that the parents become involved, because the more the students will talk about what they're learning, the more the parents and the families will be involved. So one of the ways to do that in the classroom is to provoke children by bringing really interesting things in, asking them to generate their questions, and then facilitating them, as you say, Nikki, not to do it for them, but to be the bystander and help them, to give them the cues, maybe the breadcrumbs about where to find the knowledge so that they can discover it for themselves. And we'd love, if you're listening today and you have any questioning techniques or any wonderful ideas about questions, we'd love you to write to us at the Thinking Effect podcast @gmail.com. and tell us all about your questioning techniques in your classroom. And Nikki, I'd like to thank you so much for giving us your time, bringing your knowledge and information. And I'm thrilled with the references that you've brought. And in our YouTube version, I make some visuals which include that information. So if you're watching, you'll see those, but also in the description of the podcast, if you are listening, if you open it up on BuzzFeed or wherever you get yours, or Spotify, you'll be able to read Nikki's references there. Very, very valuable information. So thanks once again for being with us and giving us your time.